And here we are this Tuesday morning. Beautiful day in Frisco, Texas, all the way from the south side to the north side. We're here with Herschel Speaks just to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on. Hopefully, say something that will inspire you to be a better human today, to do better in the world that we're living in, and to really make a difference with the moments that you have right now. Mark, I don't know if I'm in the headphones here. I hear like a little echo, but I can hear myself talk if that's the case. But anyway, so much going on, and in our world today we go beautiful. Now I don't feel like I got a head cold, although I wanted to sleep in like I had one this morning. I felt like every morning my daughter, when I wake her up, she says, "Dad, can I have just a little more time?" That's what I felt like this morning at 5 a.m. I was like, Herschel, can I have just a little bit more time? But you know what? Here's something that I read. You can tell me what you think about this, or maybe I heard someone talking about it, and I've shared it a few times. Not saying that it's obviously not an original thought of mine. And although I like to say a lot of things, I don't know how many, if any, original thoughts. Maybe there are a few original thoughts that we have, but I have no shame in admitting that I love to take good thoughts and good ideas and try to make them better, make them part of my life, and then maybe speak them as if I'm the first one to ever think that or say that. But that's probably rarely, if ever, the case. But yeah, so lots of really interesting things to talk about. I want to talk a little bit this morning. I don't spend a lot of time talking about Veteran Optimized, formerly known as Momentum Texas. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. There's another big topic in the news that's been going on for a while now, and some of it culminated yesterday with the celebration memorial of Kobe Bryant. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. I've had quite a few conversations, and I've had a few people say, why haven't you, or why don't you talk about, the Kobe Bryant, the tragedy, but then a lot of the dialogue and conversation that came as a result of that. So we may, in the second or third segment, we may jump in and talk about that a little bit, because, there are some things to consider that these circumstances kind of bring out and provokes, conversation, and also provokes, that one thing that that it seems to be one of the greatest things. Let's just not start with that topic, but let's talk about that. One of the greatest things when it comes to being a person of influence, being a leader, being someone who we all have a voice. And that's one of the things that is great about today, but it's also challenging. It's also challenging today that, think back, I'm 50. Think back 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. Think back 100 years ago. How many people, let's just say in America, how many people had the opportunity to have a national voice 20 years ago, 30 years ago? In 1990, how many people could actually say something that the whole nation would hear? How many people, when you go back to the year I was born, 1970, how many people have the ability to be heard from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam, all across the nation, could make their voice heard? I mean, we could, think back to those times. We could go back historically and see, what was on the news, who was saying what, and there was a difference in the consolidation of the stories that were being told in our nation. Because, I remember, I think I remember Fox News being new, And I think I remember that being the fourth of the major networks, if I remember that correctly. I think that it was ABC, NBC, and CBS. Those were the three main network stations, and then Fox, showed up. If I'm correct, and it doesn't matter whether it's a presidential speech or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On the mall in Washington D.C. or giving other speeches. Really, we've lived in a time, and not just to mention, not specifically just on the national stage, who could command a national audience and have a national voice, but who could speak on a global scale so that in real time or near real time, or even more importantly, in perpetuity, who could have a voice that would speak now, be heard, and then never ever go away. Those words would last and ring out forever. Those things, unless you were in a position or unless something happened that became so newsworthy that national news outlets wanted to hear it, or unless someone wrote a book and that book had life and legs and was published and republished and printed and reprinted, so few people really had the ability to have the voice that could be heard across the nation or across the world. And as a result of that, and this is why I think that this is important, as a result of the conversations, the national conversations being limited, then really the information that people got, the things that people heard, the things that caused people to react, there were fewer choices, fewer voices. And if we talk about, one of the things today, is that we commonly hear is, the media is controlled by this, the mainstream media, or, I think it's all kind of the mainstream media, whether it's, left wing or right wing, it's still mainstream, right? It's still the major voices controlled by people with lots of money, power, and an agenda, right? But now we have this ability to have many voices. This voice, what I'm saying right now, has the ability, one, to be almost immortal. It goes out there into the internet, and it exists for the conversation. I check periodically the conversation that I had with my friend Dan, other conversations that I've heard. People are still listening to those conversations, and they'll be listening to them forever. I'll still be sharing them. I'll still be talking about them. The fact that I'm talking about it right now will probably make someone go and click and link. So when I'm talking about this, when I'm saying this, that there are so many, the ability for more voices to not only speak, but to be heard, with the potential of reaching hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of people on the planet, one voice at any particular time. Because, except for in some places, the access isn't restricted. It may be restricted on who can hear it, but not restricted on where it goes or what or who it can reach. Our voices can reach anyone. But think about that. Think about the fact that now it doesn't matter what your ideology is. It doesn't matter what your political background is. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. It doesn't matter whether you're tall, short, skinny, fat, whatever. You have the ability to have a voice that can be heard. You have the ability to write a book, publish it yourself, and get it out to the world. You have the ability to create music today, and you don't have to get a radio station to play it. You don't have to get a publisher. You don't have to get distribution in the traditional sense of everything that was required to get your message out. It doesn't exist the same way. The same limitations are not there that were there before. To command a national audience, to command thousands or millions of ears. So let's take that thought and let's take that conversation and say, now we have so many more voices speaking. We have so many more people putting out their opinion, what they care about, what they believe, what they stand for. I mean, I don't know if there would be a possibility, if we look at, the current election cycle that we have coming up and the previous one that we had. I think this election cycle on the national scale, because that's what we all like to talk about, because that's what tantalizes us. The presidential race, I think there initially were 24, at least 24, 25 people running for the Democratic nomination for president. In the previous election, there were 18 people running, I think it was 18, somewhere around there, 18, 19 people running for the Republican nomination for president. And Donald Trump eventually emerged victorious in that competition. I don't know if in the past, and when I say I don't know, I actually don't know whether, whether it worked that way, 50, 60 years ago, whether that many people could command the ability to propel themselves forward, to be on that platform, to be competing for the top job in the United States. But here's what I do know. This is why I'm belaboring this part of the conversation right now, of how many voices and the ability for people to have a voice, to speak, and to get their message, their conversation and their thought out far and wide, and not be limited in scope. I mean, talk about, the true reality of freedom of speech. Now it's not just freedom of speech, but it's freedom of the ability to be heard. The ability to be heard. Because for so long, most voices in our nation were muted, not because of necessarily control or the inability to speak, but there was no real ability to be heard. So now let's think about this. If we have the ability for so many voices, so many viewpoints, for everyone to have their voice and a representation of their thought, what they care about, what they believe, to be heard, I wonder how much listening is really taking place. More voices, more viewpoints. Those voices that in the past would have been marginalized and basically rendered insignificant unless they had a champion, unless they had someone who already had a voice, who already had a platform standing up and speaking for them. Now they can speak for themselves. I have a young friend. His name is Hunter Passmore. We need to get this guy on the show. He's a graduate of Allen High School. He's one of a set of triplets. He has two sisters. Their mother, Barbara Passmore, is a friend of mine. We worked together for a short time, and he was on the news the other day, and it was in response to the bullying situation with the young child, I believe in Australia, who has dwarfism and had been bullied, and this video, and I'll be honest with you, I saw the video, I saw the beginning of it or a clip of it. I did not watch the whole thing because sometimes, I just, I don't want my emotions to go at a certain place at a certain time. I will watch it, but I didn't watch it at the time that I initially saw it. But then Hunter, who is, in his maybe mid-20s now, early 20s, he's on the news talking about this and talking about the challenges he's faced. He's got a voice. But the question is, with all the voices, with all the ways that we can get our voice out there, no one needs to, people don't need to come into an amazing studio like we have here at KVGI and, have all of this great equipment. And they can have a phone, they can have a computer, and they can get their message out. But I wonder, with all of that, is there more listening taking place? And by listening, I don't mean, is anyone, people are listening, to this podcast, they'll listen, or to this show. But are we listening in a way that we're actually hearing the different voices? That we're actually hearing what other people genuinely care about? Because we have the ability to do that now. This mother put this video on the internet. I don't know if she streamed it on Facebook, or I don't know exactly what happened, but she put it out there. And then, people all over the place, famous actor who's also a dwarf, they started a GoFundMe. It's going to Disney World. All of these things are going on. But and those are, those extreme viral things that happen. But then there are people all over this country. And this is where I think we have the potential. I don't believe that there is a political policy. I don't believe that there is an economic policy. I don't believe that there is a social policy that state, federal, or local governments can enact that will truly make us great as a nation and as people. Because again, it's been said, America's great because its people are great. If America's people cease to be great, then America will cease to be great. And no matter where you see that on the scale or the continuum, our greatness will never be defined by a political policy. It will never be defined or articulated by an economic policy. Our greatness will always be, as individuals and as a nation, by who we are as people. And as we live and look at this time where more people are speaking, more voices are being heard, people that were forced into silence because of society. I mean, we can think about lots of groups. I mean, we have this whole terminology when it comes to people who are homosexual. It's called coming out of the closet, right? And again, no matter what your thoughts, feelings, convictions are about that, I mean, just the terminology in itself means that those voices, those expressions, by nature, had to be hidden. And now we have someone running on a major political ticket, on the Democratic ticket. It's running for the top job, or at least the top public job, Not going to put my tinfoil hat on and talk about the conspiracies and the Illuminati and all the people really running things. But anyway, we won't get into that right now. But we got someone who is, a man married to another man that's running for the Democratic nomination. Voices that are shouting now that had been silenced in the past. But the real question is, on the same scale, is there more listening? And I had mothers, aunts, and teachers who always told me, you have one mouth and two ears so that you can listen twice as much as you speak. I don't know that I ever really, really encapsulated that. I believe I do listen, and I care about what other people are saying about their voices. I would probably talk still more than I should. But are we listening? We're going to touch on that a little bit more right after the break. This is Urshel. Urshel Speaks. Go ahead and start a watch party. Invite someone else to listen. And we're going to talk about that, talk about a little bit of what's going on in Veteran Optimized. We'll see you right after the break.
3, 2, 1. KVGIRadio.com.
Y'all have really just opened my bubble and just...
KVGI Radio brings you conversation and entertainment. Be sure to follow us on social media. Who streams the best talk shows? We do.
listening to KVGIRadio.com. Streaming live from the KVGI studios in Frisco, Texas. Live without limits.
All right, let's fuel this thing back up and get back into this conversation that we're having here. We got a watch party started, and then also feel free to share that watch party with anybody that you want to. Give me a shout out. If you got any questions, you got any comments, or anything that you would like to add to the conversation, please jump in. I'm going to try to keep my eye on my phone here. Man, if you really feel compelled, you got something to say, you want to be one of those voices that also wants to be heard, then give us a shout, man. I'd be glad to entertain your conversation and hear your thoughts. But here's what we're talking about. We live in a time where the freedom, the ability for more people to have a voice based on what they believe, based on what they think, based on their ideology, based on what matters to them, what hurts them, what excites them. Everybody can get their voice out. You know, and I've had this conversation, and maybe we've talked about it from time to time when it comes to things that impact us politically, things that impact us socially, things that have to do with race relations, things that have to do with, whatever it is, sports, anything. We have the ability now for people, if, when people talk about, when I kept hearing the conversation that I think is ridiculous, and you've heard me say that people say our country is more racially divided than it's ever been. And, I think that's just, you have to shut off a portion of your brain, or, just be historically not, I don't want to say intelligent, but you really got to, work really hard to think that that's a reality. Because, that's not the case. Obviously things have, racially, there's been much more divide, and sociologically, there's been, much more divide in our nation in the past with the things that have happened. But again, because we have the ability to have more voices heard, more people getting their message out, getting their heart out, speaking, that has a tremendous impact, because those voices are going out just like mine. And they're going out wherever they're sending them, and they have the ability to be picked up. So now there's the reality that, again, if a situation could happen in Paducah, Illinois, 100 years ago, and it's very likely that only the people in that community, the people in that area, the people that it actually touched, that only those people would actually know about that. But now something can happen and it can be live streamed across the country, across the world instantly. And now everybody has the right to have or the ability to have an opinion about that situation. And we can have national jubilation or national outrage instantly in real time when something goes on. So the ability for more voices and more conversation to be released is greater. But the question that I want to ask, knowing now that different ideologies, different ways of thinking, evolutions of thought can be released and can gain an audience. The question is, if we've gotten better at getting voices out there, have we gotten better at listening? Have we gotten better at hearing those voices, especially? And you know that this is where this conversation is going. If you know me, you know that this conversation is going. Have we gotten better at listening to the voices that we don't necessarily agree with? Have we gotten better at actually receiving information that doesn't automatically resonate and vibrate at the same frequency with the sounds that we've already heard? And and this is a normal and a natural phenomenon. What type of music do you like? Right? What type of music do you really like? And when you hear a new song that's of the same style, what automatically happens? Have you ever heard a song that you've never heard before, a new song, and you've never heard the song before, but somehow you can still kind of like hum along with the tune, and you kind of know where it's going, and you kind of know how it's going to end? You know why? Because that song sounds like all the other songs that you like and listen to of that same style. If you like, the two styles of music, as my one friend used to say, he said, I like both styles of music. I like country and Western, right? If you listen to country and Western music, right, there's absolutely, hey, there's my friend Morgan from Norway, man. I would love to see you again. This is one of the most awesome guys that I ever met. He did something wonderful for me when I was in Norway. Bought an amazing Norwegian sweater for my wife. It was great. Love you, Morgan. Great. I love to see you again, man. But so if we have all of these voices and we have the ability to listen, but everything that we listen to is just like the same country and Western song or the same hip hop song or the same jazz song, and there are some differences and some nuances and some different words and some different breaks and maybe in a different key, but there's a similar pattern, so it resonates with us. So that's what we choose to listen to. And I think that that's great when it comes to music. I think it's limited because, almost all types of music bring some level of value and resonate with us, and even in a deeper place than just what we hear with our ears. But what about all the voices? What about the different conversations that we can hear now? I mean, in all honesty, how many people out there, how many podcasts, if you listen to podcasts, if you read books, if you watch the news, how many times do you listen to something that is foreign to the way that you naturally think or the rhythms that you naturally and consistently operate in? I mean, how many times do you actually listen to a different type of thought? Because we have access to it now. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, what do we hear? Seek first to understand, right? To understand. The Bible says, in all you're getting, get understanding. And I think one of the great opportunities that we have now is the ability to hear, but then the choice, the cognitive decision to choose to understand other voices, other viewpoints, other opinions. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to change your mind. My thought on thinking for a change. It doesn't have to be to change your mind, but it should change your mind. And when I say change your mind, I don't automatically mean it should change your opinion or what you think. But it should expand that. It should give you some understanding. It should give you the ability to look at life from a viewpoint, from viewpoints that go beyond your own experience, that take you outside of. I mean, think about this for a second. Think about how old you are. Think about all the places in the world that you haven't traveled. Think about all the places in this country where you haven't lived. Think about all the other countries. Again, my friend Morgan's on here. He's listening. And, this guy's amazing. Awesome. Right? He's from Norway. We met when we were both in the military. When I got to Norway, for the first few days that I was there on a Norwegian base and, walking past meeting Norwegian people, I had one opinion about Norwegian people. It seemed like they were cold. They weren't friendly. It seemed like they were not, basically they weren't friendly. And we were in their country and on their base. And you know what? It took me about 3 days, maybe 3 days, to find out I was absolutely wrong. I mean, absolutely 180 degrees out from the truth. What I was basing my opinion on is I'm the type of person that can walk into a room or to a building or down the street, and I look people right in the eye, and I put this big smile on my face, and I do it on purpose, and I say hello, and I'm like constantly reaching out. Well, that just wasn't really the way that they were. Now, these people were so amazing, so friendly, so caring. I mean, and like I mentioned, Morgan, this guy went on leave while I was there, came back with this amazing, expensive, Norwegian sweater. He and another young lady from Norway ended up coming to the States and spending time with us. Right? So I was absolutely wrong just because of that initial, that first perception. But if I hadn't taken the time to connect and listen and to hear them and to understand, there's just a difference in their culture. So think about this. Think about all the places in this country you haven't spent any significant time. Think about all the places in the world where you've never lived. Think about all the different ways that a person can grow up, all the different socioeconomic factors, all the different influences of a certain lifestyle or living in a different climate. Mark, the owner of this radio station, bought a house up in Michigan and is living up there now. And he's dealing with things with his house that, guess what, I'll never deal with here. So if you spent your whole life living in Michigan or northern Minnesota, there are some things about your life, things about the way you think, things about the way you live that are totally different than someone who's grown up in Texas their whole life. So if you think about that alone, just the experiences that you have, how is it possible for you to have a thought life? How is it possible for you to be able to think? How is it possible for you to be able to form opinions just based on your limited experience? Well, it's extremely possible because that's what we all do. And we don't have any choice. That's exactly what we do. But now we have the ability, easily have the ability to hear other voices. My children go to a school. They go to a school that has, I don't even know how many nationalities. I don't know how many languages are spoken there. But I know that it's more than a few. And so they get the experience of different cultures. They get the experience of going into the cafeteria and getting, different smells, and because of the food that is brought in for lunch. I don't think there were any vegetarians in my elementary school when I went to school in elementary in Marble Falls, Texas. Not at all that I would even imagine. So now we have this opportunity. Here's the point. We have so many voices. We have so many people that are able to speak and get their message out, get their ideology out. But are we doing a better job as people, as a culture, as a nation? Are we doing a better job of listening to those other voices, because that is the thing that I think moves us forward as a community, as humanity, as individuals. I mean, as we listen to the politicians that are now fighting for our vote, on every level, what's the message that you keep hearing? What are the things that you who can get a more diverse base, and who's going to appeal to this group and who's going to appeal to that group? And then people try to, everyone is trying to express how they understand this community, or they understand women, or they understand, black people, or they understand short people, or what. Everyone's trying to make this connection with people that, they want to vote for them. That's not where the real change comes. It isn't. It's when, you and me and Joe and Mary Sixpack and everybody else, when we start to really listen. Think about you can fill Dallas Cowboy Stadium 50 times over with the places you haven't been in your life, with the things that you haven't experienced. I have a great friend, and I don't know, maybe one day she'll be on the show. Well, I say she's a great friend. I say, really, the truth is she's a great person, and she's my friend. And I hope to always be friends with her and people like her. But, and I told you we talk a little bit about this because I've had people asking me. And so there was a, situation that's happened in the news. Obviously the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and 7 other people, 9 people that died in this helicopter crash. And there's no need to even get into the details. You can, you can call me, we can talk about that, or you can chime in. But as a result of this, in a specific context, she spoke about one aspect of the entire story and saga of Kobe Bryant's life. And that hit a touch point with other people in that context. Not in a public, wide open context. And so that created one of the many types of firestorms that we've seen around a conversation like this. And so, she reached out and we talked. And here's the reason why. And this is where the greatness is. This is when you know that you have great people around you. You have the type of people that should be leading the things that matter to us the most. Is because she spoke from a perspective that was real and genuine and true that she had. And she expressed something, and it came across to other people absolutely differently than the way that she intended it. And it also sparked pain, anger, frustration from some of the other people listening. And you know what she did? Let me tell you what she didn't do. She didn't get defensive. She didn't get angry. She didn't start blocking people. She didn't run to all the people that already agree with everything that she said and go isolate herself in an echo chamber of self-righteousness. She started reading. She started studying. She started looking at the other opinions, the other feelings, the other contexts. And then she did research, and she read, and then she reached out to other people who she felt like might understand even better. And she asked for advice. And again, this isn't someone that's running for political office or needs a vote or is trying to be the popular girl in the lunchroom. This is someone who cares about people. And we had some conversations. She had conversations with other people. And I just thought, these are the people that we need leading our nation. These are the people that we need conversation, because exactly what she did is exactly what we need more of. She didn't sit down on the blessed assurance that I have a right to my opinion and nobody can change that. And you hear that all the time. I hear that all the time. My opinion's not going to change. I watched an interview, guys were talking about a thing and he said, this is my opinion and it ain't changing. Well, then, I hate to say this because, I love people. I won't just say kill yourself, but you're kind of already dead in some ways, right? Because what you're saying is I'm not going to grow anymore. I have all the information that could be had. I have all the perspective that could be had. And I choose to not allow anything else to be added. Because I want to stay exactly where I am. And many people like that. Many people like the comfort of where they are. I just don't think that that mindset creates the greatest people and the greatest change. I really don't. So to hear my friend say, this is what I missed, or this is where I was in that moment, and my thoughts were limited to items 1, 2, and 3. But I did not pay attention to items 4 through 4,000 that are just as relevant to my thoughts, just as relevant to as my opinions. And once I gathered more facts, once I listened to more voices, once I understood more hearts, then I had to make a change and I had to make amends. I had to do something different. And I don't know if anybody else cares or it matters to anyone else. I just want to be better in the way that I think, in the way that I speak. And I don't want my limited opinions and I don't want my attitude to hurt other people because I didn't care enough to be educated. We have the ability to have all of these voices. I mean, literally every person that's listening now, every person that will listen to any of these conversations has the ability to hear and be impacted by my voice. And check it out. I think I'm right about everything. Literally, I think I'm right about everything. Because if I knew I was wrong, I would change my mind. But you've heard me say it before. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm afraid to stay wrong. I'm afraid to have the wrong thought, to have a limited thought, which all of my thoughts are limited. None of them are